You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Common Descent Podcast and our fourth mini-episode compilation.
Yay!
We've done a number of these before, but if this is your first one, here's the deal. One of the benefits that our Patreon supporters can get at the highest subscription levels is the ability to request a mini-episode just for them.
Yeah.
They tell us their favorite group of animals, and then we record a little off-the-cuff our thoughts and musings on that particular requested topic just for that patron to enjoy. And then we like to put them together into these compilations once we've had a few of them and put them out for everybody to experience. These end up being a bunch of just little mini episodes.
Yes, just little tidbits, and it's a little of an anthology of just, here's a couple of cool, a few cool groups of organisms, and we'll just nerd out about them for a little bit.
Yes, and we love to do it as a benefit and thank you for the patrons who support us on Patreon.
Immensely so. It's so nice to be able to directly send something back and say thank you.
So in this mini-episode compilation, you will hear us discuss Icarosaurus, which is a flying reptile from New Jersey, for Elizabeth. We will discuss Corvids for Stephen, Thylacines for Traci, Shrikes for Oscar, Entelodonts for Lucy, and Iguanas for Tobias.
Yes.
All super cool topics. We had a ton of fun recording all of those discussions. A huge thank you once again to all of these patrons and to all of our patrons who support us on Patreon and allow us to keep doing the things that we like to do with the podcast and keep bringing our science communication efforts to you, the listeners.
Yes, we appreciate it so very much.
And without any further ado from us, enjoy the mini episodes.
Have fun.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, Elizabeth, and welcome to your very own patron mini-episode, requested by you and recorded by us. You are a top-level patron, which means that you got to request us to record a little mini-episode about our thoughts on a particular creature of your choosing, and you chose Icarosaurus.
Nice choice.
Very cool choice. Let's do some refreshers. Here I am on Wikipedia again. So Icarosaurus is one of those gliders.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about a bunch of these in the gliders episode. Icarosaurus specifically, late Triassic, from the Lockatong Formation of New Jersey. And I believe Icarosaurus is only known definitively from one specimen.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That this is, which I think is true of a number of the gliding animals of the past, like that Cretaceous lizard, Xianglong, I think is only known from one specimen. So Icarosaurus was one of the ones with just the long ribs.
Yeah.
That had extra long ribs that supported a membrane between them to glide around the bizarre sky of the Triassic period.
Yeah. Icarosaurus, first off, great name.
Great name. I wanted to mention that as well.
Great name.
The Icarus lizard?
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool name.
That's a lot of fun.
Who named it? I'm going to look at it.
Oh, yeah, good idea. But also, Icarosaurus is, it looks distinct. It looks different than gliding lizards that we have today, and gliding reptiles that we have today. And indeed,
not a lizard.
It is not a lizard.
Triassic reptile.
And even though we have, rib gliding lizards or lizard today.
Yeah, we have Draco lizards.
But these do look different. They're much longer, more exaggerated. But it is, and we mentioned this in the episode, super bizarre still how similar this version of gliding is to the Draco lizard today.
Well, and it's one of those strange situations. By the way, Edwin Colbert, famous earlier paleontologist. Way to go, Edwin.
Good job, Edwin.
Good name. Icarosaurus Siefkeri, in honor of Alfred Siefker, who I think it seems like found it.
Oh.
Who was a teenager at the time.
Good job, Alfred.
Says Wikipedia. Way to go, everybody. So today we have Draco lizards, and Draco lizards have elongated ribs that support
a gliding membrane. And this is a feature that is unique to Draco. They are the only animals today that glide this way.
Yes.
So how fortuitous it is that we have one group of reptiles that does this today, so that when paleontologists found these fossils, they had any idea what to make. Because you see these fossils of Icarosaurus and Coelurosaurus and Coeniosaurus, these different weird Triassic gliders, and they look like a lizard skeleton, except that they've got this folded umbrella's worth of spokes sticking. Their ribs are just super long. How utterly bizarre to see a fossil like that. And maybe Alfred thought this when he first saw it as a teenager discovering this fossil.
Its ribs have exploded.
What in the world is going on with this lizard?
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, not a lizard.
Yes, this lizard-shaped thing. Yeah, it is super bizarre. Like, the feature itself is bizarre. You're gliding with your ribs is weird.
That's a weird thing to do.
That's a weird thing.
Apparently a common thing to evolve how to do.
Yep.
Because it has evolved many times.
Yep.
But it's a weird thing to do.
It's a weird thing to do with your ribs. Also with Icarosaurus, and I don't know how big Icarosaurus is.
Not terribly big.
I assume not, because it's a glider.
Internet tells me.
But also, its ribs are so much longer than Draco lizards. And, like, Draco lizard ribs, the flap folds up, and when it's folded, you can't tell that Draco lizards are gliding lizards.
Yes.
They just look like a little lizard, like a fence lizard that we have here in the US. And super unassuming until it transforms and glides.
Unfurls like Buzz Lightyear, sticks its wings out.
But like with Icarosaurus, there's no way you were hiding those completely.
Right.
Because they're longer than where your back legs are.
Did they just go along your back or something?
Yeah, did you just have a Batman cape when you were running around and then you fold it out and glide around the fighting crime in the forest?
Wikipedia says, again, Wikipedia, so we have not confirmed this information.
Vetted it.
Wikipedia says it was about 4 inches long.
All right.
10 centimeters from the skull to the hips. So, and plus tail.
Yeah, so you were looking at...
So a hand-sized thing.
That makes sense. And that's a very good gliding size.
Yeah. I'm also fast. So Draco lizards today have a colorful gliding surface.
Yes.
And I don't actually know if they do other things with their gliding surface.
Yeah, are they displaying
Are
with
you
it?
using it for display? I have to imagine some of these ancient gliding reptiles were using these as display structures.
Yeah.
That you would flop it out at like a bird, like wings on a bird, and just move. How mobile was it? Were you able to do little maneuvers with it?
I wonder.
Show off to potential mates?
I wonder if there's any, like, and this is something I don't know about today's gliding animals, but there's gotta be gliding courtships of like, I'm gonna glide over you or toward you or something, you know, like birds will do
part of the display.
Yeah, to show off and to either show my patterning while it's out or to show my physical capability.
Yeah.
Like there's gotta be weird stuff like that going on.
I don't know how good eyesight gliding animals have. Like,
good point.
Would you need to be able to spot a mate a couple trees over and then glide over to them? Because birds have exquisite eyesight. Like,
yes.
Birds have very, very good eyesight. I don't know if gliding animals today are like spotting the tree I'm heading towards. Like, I'm going to glide to that tree, or if they're more leaping into the air and then I'll figure it out as I go.
Yeah, on the way.
On the way, I will pick a tree.
We'll find a landing pad.
Because a lot of these animals are rather small.
Yes.
And small mammals have good eyesight. Small reptiles often will have decent eyesight. So it's not impossible, but especially for things that are long distance gliders, gliding hundreds of feet, there's no way you spotted your tree ahead of time.
Yeah.
So is that even important for a gliding animal to be able to see?
Yeah. Or are you just maneuverable enough to just make the decision on the fly?
Well, but also gliding animals tend to live in relatively dense forests.
Yeah.
So it is very possible that the strategy is just, I will leap and there will be a tree in my way.
Yeah,
I will go this way and eventually I will hit a tree.
Yep.
They're also often very maneuverable.
Yes.
So they absolutely could angle towards whatever they want to land on.
Yeah, it's super. It is super interesting to think about ancient gliders because today's gliders are so often peculiar and leading very, very notable lifestyles in that they're almost all arboreal and often doing similar things. So it's very cool to think of an ancient gliding animal and being able to ask how much of that transfers.
Yeah.
Are all these similarities between a lot of gliding animals today, were they still similar in the Triassic?
And odds are no.
Yeah.
Odds are they were doing very strange things back in the Triassic. Well, they were also living, the Triassic is such an odd time to think about because there were numerous different groups of gliding reptiles with different gliding strategies in some cases, but also in a variety of places.
Yep.
Some of them are, because I'm Googling again, but Cueniosaurus is from England. Coelurosaurus, which is earlier, is from Madagascar. Like, we've got gliders in various parts of the world who are gliding in very similar ways, which is more like modern day gliding mammals.
Yes.
Which we see in various places gliding in similar ways, but very different from modern day reptiles, where all of our gliding reptiles, I'm pretty sure, are in Southeast Asia.
Yep.
Like the snakes and the lizards are in that one part of the world.
Yeah.
So there would have been, this time period would have been fascinating. It also makes me wonder, and this is also piggybacking off of the discussion in our gliding episode, how many gliders we haven't found.
Yes.
From the fossil record.
These small, delicate, lightweight animals.
Yeah. Given that we have found as many as we have, which is very surprising, is this just a thing that was always a thing? Like, anywhere, any time period you go to, you can find a glider somewhere.
Yep.
That is gliding between the trees.
Yeah. Which would make sense, because as soon as you have trees, it's a beneficial thing to be able to glide from them.
Absolutely. And it's evolved in so many groups.
Mm-hmm.
Reptile, lizards, true lizards, snakes, not true lizards, other reptile groups, various mammal groups, both placentals and marsupials, and neither.
Mm-hmm.
And also fish and insects. This is a thing that seems like it's not particularly difficult to achieve.
Yes. Yeah. Also, another thing that's neat about Icarosaurus and Draco lizards and any of the rib gliding reptiles, I've always just enjoyed for just the quirkiness of it, that completely coincidentally, and it's why we named them Draco lizards, you look like a European dragon.
Yes.
Which is just, there's something very satisfying to me that ancient people, when thinking up what a monstrous reptile would look like with wings, were like, well, the only place that makes sense to put these wings is in the middle of the body.
Straight in the middle of the back.
Just right there on its, at best on its shoulders. Just slap them on there. And nature went, well, the best place to put a gliding structure is right here on the sides of the body.
Yeah. Here are some extra wings.
Yeah. And absolutely, people who thought up European dragons were not inspired by Draco lizards.
One imagines not.
I've never seen any indication. It just so happened that our imagination created a very similar shaped creature that has actually evolved multiple times in different groups.
Yeah. Nature, totally unoriginal.
Yes.
Nature did it first and second and third and so many times. Well, Draco lizards today also are not limited to just the gliding surface for their adaptations. They've also got, there's that study recently that showed they use their hands to maneuver their wings.
Christian Bale Batman style.
They've got that flap that has a name that I can't think of on the throat, which I have also seen reference that they're using that to help them maintain stability in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And Icarosaurus, to my knowledge, is known from a incomplete specimen. There are parts of it we don't have. Well, did you have cool strategies?
Yep.
Did you have other flaps somewhere on the body that you were using to help with that gliding?
Was your neck weird? Was your tail weird in some way we haven't seen? Did your feet have stuff?
Yeah, were your limbs, do you have webbing on your limbs?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of... It would be fascinating to know more about the many diverse strategies that gliding reptiles have used over time.
Well, and especially because, as you made the comparison, the diversity of ancient gliding reptiles is more similar to the diversity of modern gliding mammals in their distribution and variation, that it makes sense that you would have some uber-duper specialized ones like the Colugo, which is webbed all the way around the body.
Is just a flap of skin.
Yeah, it's just a kite.
With a face in it. Well, and there were, like, Charovipteryx, the purported delta wing-shaped gliding reptile.
Yeah.
So, just all sorts of weird, very weird stuff.
Yeah.
So cool. Gliding animals are super cool. And the Triassic gliders are just this fascinating bunch of different approaches to gliding.
Also, just, it's itty-bitty and it's fluttering around. It's flitting around. Not fluttering.
Probably not.
Flitting
not
around.
If things are going well.
There's an updraft. Ah! But that's cool. That's a very pleasing... Like, when you get to see videos of Draco lizards gliding, it's very neat and just adorable on how small and quick they are.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be able to think about that happening in the past. It makes me happy.
Oh, man. If they did have a cape that they couldn't completely fold up, that would be an exceptional opportunity to develop camouflage.
Oh, yeah.
To make it leaf-shaped or leaf-colored or something, that you would just... an animal would be walking along on a branch and see this weird-looking leaf and then get too close and the leaf would fly away.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool creatures. Elizabeth, thank you so much for that request. And actually, another thing that's cool about that is it's from New Jersey.
Yes.
And that's a cool place that doesn't have a whole lot of different cool fossils to claim to fame. It has Hadrosaurus, which is kind of a big deal.
Yes.
The first dinosaur in North America. That's pretty cool. But also, Icarosaurus is a very cool find for New Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you, Elizabeth, for your support, for your encouragement, for your kind words that you like to give us, and also for your kind donations on Patreon.
Yeah.
And for recommending us to talk in your mini episode about this super cool little creature that ties into just this fascinating evolutionary trend over time. We've had fun. We hope you have also had fun. And we hope that we'll continue to see you and hear from you in the future. Bye.
Bye. Hello, David.
Hello, Will.
And hello, Stephen, and welcome to your personal patron mini-episode. You asked us if we would talk about corvids.
And the answer is yes.
Happily.
Corvids are great. We talk about birds rather infrequently on the podcast.
Yeah,
They're not alone. Like, we don't do a lot of fish discussion,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to things like dinosaurs and stuff like that. But yeah, birds, and as we have both, I think, expressed in the past, we both find birds fascinating and incredibly unfamiliar.
Well, for me, it falls into the category. I was literally just talking to Anne about this, that I find the concept of bird just amazingly interesting.
Very cool.
But then I am not... my interest wanes when it comes to, like, identifying individual birds.
Mm-hmm.
And like songbirds for me in my brain's very much like bird.
Sure.
Red, blue, yellow, green.
All of those 4,000 species.
Yeah.
That's bird.
Slightly different colorations, slightly different sizes, and they are, each one absolutely is interesting, I'm sure, if I took the time.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't click in my brain to...
Well, there's a reason why the 2 episodes that we've done dedicated to specific groups of birds have been vultures and penguins.
Yes.
Because they're very strange, very distinctive birds. And speaking of distinctive birds, corvids is a great choice.
Absolutely. Like, I am usually a person who leans toward the big ground birds.
Yes.
But man, corvids, if it weren't for the cassowary existing, corvids would probably be my favorite group of birds.
So the official list, and by official I mean on Wikipedia,
Yes.
of birds that are included within the family Corvidae are nutcrackers, cheepies, jackdaws, rooks, jays, and the ones that I think of first, ravens and crows.
Yes.
And in fact, I've seen the Corvidae, the family, called the crow family.
Yes, exactly. It is very often identified by them, and they are like one of the dominating groups within that group. Like,
Yeah.
they make up a chunk of it.
Well, they're also, corvids in general are a very prevalent and distinctive group of birds because they are all over the world.
Yep.
They are a very widespread family of birds, and they're also really big.
Yes.
Like, they're passerines, so they're in the same group as, you name a bird, that group.
Yeah, your perching birds is, I think,
Sparrows and all of those. But crows and ravens are big for that group of birds. They're not, eagles, but they're big birds.
Yeah, like as far as the average size of bird goes, they definitely trend at least toward the upper middle, if not the lower upper scale. Like they're sizable enough. Yeah, they're really interesting. They're also, you mentioned they're widespread. They are an interesting widespread group because lots of others, especially with birds, when I think of it, I think of like pigeons and your smaller seed-eating birds where you're small, you breed quickly, you're everywhere. The general kind of mouse situation of you're everywhere because you're small, you eat enough things, and you make lots of babies.
Right, you're sort of the general ideal of a bird.
Yeah.
Like generic image of bird. And that works everywhere.
And crows definitely, and ravens and their cousins definitely have a bit of that going in that their overall body shape is pretty standard bird.
Yeah.
They don't have some unusual, completely...
Right. You're not a heron. You're not an ostrich. There's nothing particularly weird at first glance.
So you've got that general bird design, but they fall into an interesting category of like you're successful because you are clever enough to make use of wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's because like rodents, it has that feeling of like you're good just because you're the Swiss Army of animal.
Sure.
Like you can chew through anything, you can swim, you can climb, you can eat whatever you want, you make as many there's not many problems that you don't already have a tool for.
And crows and their families seem to have some of that going on in that they tend to be, as far as I know, across the family, they eat all sorts of things. They can survive in all sorts of habitats. They have a fairly generalized body plan that is just good for doing bird stuff. But also, they are extremely adaptable and behaviorally flexible. And this kind of, if you were checking your watch and timing us, however many minutes to talking about crow intelligence.
Oh, yeah. No.
Because that's the famous thing about this group is that they are highly intelligent. And when I think of intelligent, I often think of, you hear stories of them doing cool problem-solving things.
Yes.
Experiments where they'll use tools to like get food out of somewhere. I often think of the displacement experiments.
Yes.
Where you've got a cup of water and there's food in it and the crows will drop rocks into the water to raise the water level. Cool stuff like that. But they're also like very social in many species. They also are very good at like remembering places and places that they've hidden stuff or location. They've like all the ways that we interpret intelligence and cognitive skill in other species. This family exhibits most of those.
Yeah, they check in most of the boxes. And that's very much what I like. While a rodent very often already just has the adapted tools to handle most situations, crows, I feel like, very often don't, but they'll figure it out. And that's what's so interesting to me, is like I could put a crow basically anywhere on the planet and I would feel relatively confident that they could make it there, not because you've already got the ability to handle it, but you'll look, you'll observe, you'll watch the other animals, and you'll figure out where a crow fits in here.
Right.
Like that's what fascinates.
Find the crow-shaped hole in this environment and fill it.
You've become a generalist not because you're just anatomically good at everything, but that you will figure out how to fit into this environment. And that's a very interesting, it's a very human way of being in the world. Of like, we're not supposed to be in the tundra, but we'll figure it out.
We're making it work.
Yep. That's cool.
I've actually seen discussions, and I've seen this in reference to birds. I've seen this in reference to other things. The idea of one of the potential drivers of we always have to be. I'm always cautious to just say intelligence because that's a term that is very hard to define.
Absolutely,
but cognitive abilities, problem-solving skills,
our anthropocentric definition of intelligence,
the sort of things that we look at and go, "That's a smart animal." I've seen discussions in scientific circles that one of the potential drivers for that kind of behavior might be difficult living conditions.
Yeah, absolutely.
That just like living in harsh conditions might drive the evolution of unusual anatomical features, certain harsh conditions in certain groups of animals might drive the evolution of being able to problem solve and figure stuff out so that they can do exactly what you're describing. About, yeah, this is a tough environment to live in, but I can figure it out because I've evolved this particular kind of brain function that lets me go, all right, yeah, I'm going to drop these nuts onto the street so that cars run them over and then fly down and pick the nuts up when the light turns red.
Absolutely. Well, and it makes sense how something like that could evolve before you ever even get to the, I'm making my own tool and modifying sticks and stuff. Just starting with the social stuff you were talking about, like crows are the ones famous for it, but like this group's social complexity is so intense.
Some of them, in terms of just social corvids, rooks, I know are famous in some places for roosting in just huge numbers of social groups.
The time I had that really made me re-look at crows and observe them in a new light was when I learned about them not only like remembering things, and I think this one was specifically talking about the experiments that one university did where they were capturing crows and then realized that the crows were remembering the researchers and setting up alarms. So they had to start wearing masks to go do their crow population studies so that way they wouldn't harass those students.
Yep. And I've seen reference to studies of crow that have found that crows can recognize human facial features or even behavioral cues.
The part of those studies that I've heard a couple of different times that really just blew my mind is that there's been at least a couple of examples of those kinds of studies where then after those students graduated, finished their research, and came back, they were still recognized. And it was like, no, it's been enough years that this should not be the same crows. This should be at least the next generation of crows, if not some of the next, but they had passed the knowledge on. And that's the part that's like, that's society.
Right.
Like
well, now you're like orcas, and primates.
Like that's oral tradition. That you are passing on knowledge and culture and behavior. Like not all crows scream at this type of face, but we do. That's what this flock, that's what this murder does.
Yes.
Is we scream at these faces like my grandfather did and like you will do.
Yes.
Like that's society. That was the time I had a moment of like, okay, whoa, wait. Let's re-examine all this because that's amazing.
Yeah. There have been when you talk about studies of animals that are impressive in their cognitive abilities, things that we humans look at and go, "Whoa, that's cool." That did not expect that another species would do that. You hear about primates, and not all primates, certain primates, certain cetaceans. Corvids and parrots.
Yep.
Like those are the big ones.
Yep.
And yeah, crows are always up there. One of the things, because I was doing a little bit of, refreshing my memory reading about corvids before this, like we do for these mini episodes. And there was a mention of corvids, crows, and ravens in mythology.
Yep.
And in symbolism and in culture. And just the note that they have appeared in many cultures, mythological stories and things like that, which on the one hand is not surprising. They live in all sorts of places.
Yes.
They're very distinctive birds. They sound distinctive. Like, I don't know bird calls at all, but even I know what if it's a crow raven type animal.
Yeah, when a bunch of dark colored birds fly overhead and are making that noise, you're like, okay, well, yeah.
Those are either crows or ravens. I can't tell the difference. But yes, that group. But one thing that was noted is that they are often represented in various cultures' mythology as clever and intelligent or tricky, things like that, which is extremely cool because, and this is like, Native American traditions going back quite a ways.
I know Aesop's Fables features them a bunch of times.
And that's really cool because those are things that way predate our modern scientific investigations where we get to go, oh yes, we did a controlled experiment and it turns out that these birds remember things 9 months later, or it turns out that they can make a stick into a tool and use it for a thing. That means that just people living alongside these animals over time would look at them and go, that's a real smart bird.
Yes, that we've just been observing that.
It's just been an obvious thing about them. Very much like these days you hear stories from people that are, I'll go online and I'll hear a story from someone who's like, yeah, I've made friends with the crows in my neighborhood by accident, and now I have these crows who follow me. And they're always anecdotal, so it's never like, this is a clear empirical study that shows this cognition. But it sure sounds like a bunch of animals doing something very insightful, very intuitive, that we humans have just been watching these birds for hundreds and thousands of years and being impressed by how seemingly clever and smart they are.
Yes.
That's really, like, when you're clever enough that you show up in our mythology as the smart ones,
yes,
that's pretty cool.
Well, and also, kudos to you for living up to your reputation.
Right.
Because, like,
owls
have a very similar one, and they are not problem solvers. So it's cool that, like, we noticed that, and then we studied it and was like, no. The anecdotal stories seem to hold up. And then we also took a look inside and go, no, their brain to body size also matches chimps and dolphins and almost matches up. Like, their brain to body size is what we would expect for the behavior we're seeing. They are legitimately unusually brain powered for a bird and for just an animal. So it is really, really fascinating, and it colors everything about them because, like I said, it's a very human situation of how they're successful around the world. It feels that way when you talk about us or orcas, where it's like you can't really separate any part of their behavior from their intelligence, just like you couldn't with us. Sure. Like, that's just you have to, anytime I see a crow doing something, I don't think like, oh, that's just your instincts driving you to do that. I go, why are you doing that?
What's your logic?
Yeah.
What's your reasoning behind that?
Yeah. What's your motivation? Because with any other animal, I'd be like, well, that lizard's sitting there because it's warm there, and they were feeling too cold, so they were driven to find warmth.
Sure.
But, like,
which is probably doing a slight disservice to the lizard.
Yes.
There's logical thinking there, but it doesn't spur that same process of being like, is this, I don't feel like that lizard's up to something.
Well, and it's like,
As a crow, it's like, how many steps have you thought ahead of this situation?
Yes.
What chess game are you playing today? Well, or are you just sitting up there?
It's kind of this, I would use this at the aquarium all the time when people would talk about, the fish looks sad because it was just sitting there, but that's what that species of fish does. And I would have to explain, it's like, well, you can't use the same sense of motivations and emotions.
Right.
Like, is there such thing as a sad ant? Do they have emotions? We don't.
Do they have sad?
Yeah, do they have sad? Do they have thoughts, or do they just have very complicated sequence of instincts, interactions? That's hard for us. We can't determine that. That's too obscure a thing. And that gets, that's always been a very hard thing to map with animals, of like, how much is a snake thinking, or how much is it just processing information? Is processing info the same as thinking?
Right. And where is the line?
Yeah. Like, but with crows and like the short list of other primates and cetaceans, like, I'm pretty sure our brains are doing almost the same thing, which is very, very, we don't often get to see our way of kind of interacting with the world mirrored in another species.
Yeah. Well, and another interesting way that corvids are similar to those other classically considered intelligent groups is that they are also very social.
Yes.
In many species, they are cooperative parents or cooperative nesters, where it isn't just a crow off there being smart. They tend to gather in groups and work together on stuff. Not working together in the sense of like pack hunting, but they will raise young together, they'll make nests together, they'll forage for food together.
They'll mob predators together. Like, that's very famous, where you'll see a bunch of crows chasing a hawk away.
Jays are very famous for that. Which is very interesting because, and our sample size is small, but it raises the question of, does complex social behavior naturally emerge in so-called intelligent species? Or were you able to evolve that level of cleverness because you are social species?
Yes, which I've often seen as one of the suggestions that the more complex your social hierarchy gets, the more brain power and memory you need to keep track of said hierarchy. Just to remember, all right, you're on top, you're second from the top, you're almost the same, and just who's where.
Keeping track of the politics.
Exactly. That you just need more brain power to map that, and that then opens doors for, well, while you have all that brain power,
right,
might as well learn how to crack that nut your beak's not good at cracking.
I've also seen it noted that corvids also tend to grow up slow.
Yeah.
They spend a long time as young, which is a lot of developmental time available for learning, for brain development, which is something that is potentially more feasible in a group of animals that is highly social.
Yes.
Right? We see that with a lot of primates. We see that with a lot of cetaceans. It is, in fact, one of the reasons cited oftentimes for why cephalopods aren't as dynamic and social as they otherwise seem like they could be, because they do seem to be very intelligent. That complex social behavior and familiar levels of seeming intelligence seem to go very much hand in hand.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they fall into that group of when people like to ask the questions of like, if humans disappeared, what species,
Who
what
takes
group
over next?
would form the next civilization? And of course, the other primates,
right? They're right there.
They've probably got a little bit of a lead.
We are creating a world that is very difficult for other primates and cetaceans to live in.
Yes.
Whereas corvids are doing pretty well.
Yep.
So maybe they are going to survive the human experience and be the ones left standing.
Yep. And when, I've often heard the thinking of, why haven't dolphins developed as much tool use as some of the other highly intelligent groups? And the answer often is they don't have hands. And they don't have particularly mobile mouth. That's
right.
That they don't really have the dexterity for that to be an easy option for them. And crows lack the hands, but they have very nimble beaks.
Yeah. Well, and because bird beaks are extremely, we've talked about this on the podcast, they are an extremely dexterous finesse tool. Yeah.
Yes. And that is probably one of the other things that I love so much about corvids is they just look cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we wrap up the discussion, we do need to at least make brief mention of the fact that crows and ravens and the like also just look cool.
They look so cool.
They're very striking birds.
Yes, and I would assume that is another huge reason they've made it into human culture and storytelling over the years.
I assume it's also part of why their other reputation in human cultural storytelling is being ominous.
Yes. Absolutely.
And intimidating, because they're big. They're often, crows and ravens in particular, are dark colored birds. They have that caw that is not like the cheerful singing of a songbird. It's that ha. They're also associated with carrion a lot of the time, because they will scavenge. They'll feed on carrion.
They don't have cute little songbird beaks. They've got this somewhat menacing
a nut crushing beak.
Yeah, they've got this decent daggerish beak sticking off their face, and so they are impressive birds. I also, and this is just a very personal preference when it comes to birds, because I think birds look great, but then I'll see them move around, and when the ones that hop, which a lot of perching birds hop, they don't really walk,
boing, 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 boing.
because their legs are
That's
best
not what they're built for.
together, since they're meant to be on a branch,
and
they're hopping from branch to branch, and that's very cute. But it's not very cool.
Sure.
And as a kid, that was cute's fine, but cool will always win out over cute for me.
Right, but you're no cassowary.
Yeah, no.
Stalking through the grass.
And crows walk.
Yeah, they do.
And it makes me very happy. And it's still a little hopping kind of, but it's fun watching them walk around slow, when you just see them out in a yard and they're just kind of walking through the grass. It's that's a theropod.
That's a little dinosaur.
That's so cool. Oh.
Stephen, this is a great choice of animals to have us talk about. As you can intuit, we could geek out about crows and stuff for quite a long time. This is a very cool group of birds.
It's
I
fantastic.
suspect it is only a matter of time before they get an episode of the podcast.
Oh yes, I then we can talk all about. I've had a dream of making one of those crow vending machines where you can train them to bring money to then dispense peanuts.
Yep.
I thought, oh man, that just is such a pleasing idea.
Yeah, so there will almost certainly be more discussion of corvids in the future. Let's wrap it up there.
Yeah.
That's a good discussion. That we have to stop ourselves.
Yes.
At a certain point. This is a challenge with the mini episodes off, is that we have to at some point go, all right, this is enough.
Yep.
We need to stop. Stephen, thank you for your suggestion, and thank you, of course, for supporting us on Patreon
Thank
as
you
much
so
as you
much.
do. We really appreciate it. Stay tuned for more stuff to come. There's more episodes coming out. We hope that you enjoy your little personalized mini episode.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
And hello, Traci, and welcome to your personal Patreon mini episode. As thanks for your subscription and donations to us on Patreon, we've got a little episode here just for you on the topic that you requested, which is Thylacines.
Yeah.
Also Thylacines.
Oh.
This is, I've heard it called Thylacines, this animal. I've always said thylacine. I don't
Yeah.
think that it makes a whole lot of a difference. The genus is Thylacinus.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense. It's-
Okay, that makes...
Sure, although you could also pronounce that Thylacinus, and, who's going to have a problem with it. But we're going to call them Thylacines because that's how we do it. I don't know if that's a North American thing. Who knows?
Good question. I do like the sound of it better, but it's also the one I'm familiar with.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
I always find that funny when it comes to pronunciation. It's like, that one sounds silly. It's like, well, of course it does. You heard it second.
Yes, exactly. The Thylacine, a.k.a. the Tasmanian wolf, a.k.a. Tasmanian tiger, a.k.a. I'm sure a bunch of other names.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool group of animals. Very famous group of animals.
Yeah.
Thylacines are a very interesting case of animals as far as sort of general perception and understanding of them go, because they occupy this kind of intermediate between the ways we talk about modern living species and the ways we talk about extinct species.
Yes.
Because Thylacines, they spent so much time living alongside actual, modern humans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were in the wild, at least in Tasmania, up until about a century ago. So there's a lot of information about them. There's a lot of connection to them. There's a lot of cultural significance to them, especially in Tasmania in particular. But they're also extinct.
Yep.
And they are gone. So they're a very interesting, and I think they get a lot more attention as far as recently extinct animals go than, say, other famous examples like Steller's sea cow, or even dodos.
Yes.
Like, dodos, everybody knows dodos, and they are a very famous example of a species that humans drove to extinction. But I don't get the impression that there are many people or cultures around the world who are, really attached to dodos.
Well, I saw a video just the other day about dodos, and I think part of the reason that they fall into different categories, we didn't really start paying attention to the fact that the dodo had gone extinct until it sounds like well after it had gone extinct. And so once people went, all right, so this bird's gone extinct, what was it like? And people realized we don't have any specimens.
Right.
We have a couple of drawings, but not even many of, people only started paying attention to it well after it had already been wiped out.
Yeah.
And so it was this kind of historical extinction. That happened when we weren't paying attention. I feel like the thylacine falls into a different emotional category for us and interest category because they were around up and we have video of the last thylacine. We had cameras. This is during the age of film that we lost this species. So this went extinct. They made it almost up until we were actually paying attention to the idea that we were wiping out species and we were becoming environmentally it was so close.
Yeah. I think that there's also something to be said, probably specifically comparing them to dodos. Dodos are a relatively small and relatively, sorry dodos, inconsequential species of animal.
Yeah.
Like, they lived on an island, maybe
Yeah.
2 islands, Mauritius, and I think maybe another nearby island. This isn't a discussion about dodos. I
Yeah.
didn't research dodos. But they lived in a very restricted area. They didn't encounter a lot of people.
Mm-mm.
I don't actually know off the top of my head sort of the history of human occupation
In that area.
in that region. But, you know, there weren't a lot of people in the world who had interacted specifically with dodos. Certainly up until the ones that wiped out dodos.
Yep. We don't find a lot of... We find cave art of thylacines. Like,
Right.
We don't find that same cultural connection.
And thylacines were relatively widespread. They lived in close connection with people for a very long time, especially back when they were in mainland Australia. But also, thylacines were apex predators.
Yep.
They are big, right? These are wolf-sized animals. That's a big animal. They are predators. It's one of the reasons that they got so much negative attention from humans,
Yep.
for the same reason that wolves have gotten negative attention, is that they were seen as dangerous and
Yes.
harmful to livestock and things like that.
And so it's... My mind definitely categorizes the dodos and even things like stellar sea cow as like, it's still super sad you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
But considering when you got wiped out, I mean, the chances that you did make it through were almost lower than not, because that's what we were just doing back then.
Right.
It's just culling the earth
Thylacines almost made it long enough.
to where we
To be
could-
saved.
Yes, exactly. It feels like we just were barely too late
Yeah.
to shift our mentality and save this species. Like, they could have been saved.
I was reading an anecdote. I was going through the Wikipedia page and just sort of refreshing my memory on thylacine stuff. And there is a description in there that the last thylacine, the one that you talked about,
Mhm.
died at the zoo and then was sent to a museum. But it wasn't documented properly.
Yep, yeah.
Apparently, from what I read. And the likely reason why it wasn't documented properly is because it was collected illegally and brought to the zoo. So the zoo was like, all right, well, we're not going to write down where it actually came from because that's illegal.
Yes.
We should not document that. And because of that, the specimen was lost for for
Mhm.
decades and no one had access to it. We almost got to a time of really caring about conservation and really caring about documenting that sort of stuff across most institutions, and they just barely missed out on it.
And it's not to say that like we've turned things around and things don't go extinct because of us anymore.
Right.
But a lot of it is not as common in the more recent history that we're wiping out large, widespread.
Right.
You know.
Well, they went extinct not long after a national bounty was put on them.
Yes.
To kill a bunch. And again, in what I was reading, I saw the number cited as like something like 2,000 rewards were given
Yep.
for killed thylacines. And that's a thing that we just generally frown upon these days.
Exactly.
That's not a thing that you're likely to see much in modern times because we are a bit more conscious, a bit more environmentally conscious about stuff like that.
Yeah. So they I think for like the human psyche, they often feel like a missed chance.
Yep.
That like,
Well, they're also big and charismatic.
Yes.
Like, they are called wolves and tigers because of a similarity, right? An appearance. They look similar. They're shaped like wolves and they're striped like tigers.
yep.
And we love wolves and tigers.
Mhm.
Like, those are extremely beloved groups of animals. And they are also icons of conservation.
Yep.
Like, tigers are a famous example of an endangered species and protected species. Wolves have all sorts of cool success stories here in
Mhm.
North America where they were wiped out of places and we've put them back to places. So you've got these animals that have these stories and that we just love. We put them in our movies and we put them in our stories and we have stuffed animals of them and they're really charismatic big animals. And thylacines are so similar to those. And it feels, if you had just made it like 50 more years,
Yep.
you may have been up there with those.
Yes.
Beloved, large, cuddly, furry predators that are a conservation success story.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But they're not.
Yep.
They're the opposite. They are the opposite of a conservation success story. They are perhaps the most famous story
Yes.
of a species wiped out by humans at a time where we unequivocally should have known better.
Yes. Yes.
This
Precisely.
wasn't like several thousand years ago we showed up on an island and hunted everything for food and then left and never spared a thought to it.
Yeah, we're still struggling with the idea of extinctions and like.
Sure.
No,
This was the early 1900s.
Yep.
We, as a species, we knew better already, and we did it anyway.
Yeah. And I think that the other big thing that is so notable with them is their absence is very obvious in that there's not another large predatory marsupial that like, oh, okay, we lost the thylacine, but we still have the Tasmanian bear.
Right, like if we lost tigers. It's like that, but we've got lions and leopards and jaguars and all these cool big cats.
There's no other animal left like the thylacine. We have Tasmanian devils, which is the now largest predatory marsupial.
Right, which is silly to think of because
it's so much smaller.
They're so small.
It's so much different in their anatomy and their shape. They are a very different animal. So it's we lost that and we lost something truly unique to the planet.
Yes.
I think that's when we lost this thing, and not only is this species gone, but that kind of animal is gone now, and may never be again. There may never be a pouched predator again of that size. Like that may be it. That chapter of Earth may be over less than a century ago.
Yeah,
and that's very sobering.
Absolutely. Well, and we express all these thoughts, and it's no surprise at all that there are so many people obsessed with trying to find evidence of still living thylacines.
Yes.
Like, what an incredible discovery it would be, because it would be a second chance.
Exactly.
It'd be an opportunity for us to go, oh, we can do it. There they are. We found 4 of them living in the woods of Tasmania somewhere. Would that be the quickest that an area was ever designated a protected region?
Surely.
Like, I don't know if it's officially a national park. I don't know how it works in Australia. But whatever their version of it is, would that be the fastest that one was ever erected? I was like, no humans are allowed to walk in this place.
Yep.
Starting right now.
Yep. If you're bipedal, get out. Yeah.
That means you, kangaroos.
Yep. No.
Get out of here.
It is. I definitely think that is a big driving aspect of that side of the crypto community, the cryptid community of hoping that they're
the crypto community is something different now.
Yep. And that it is that feeling of human guilt that hopefully there are some left and we can make right. And I always feel bad when I go into my cryptozoology mode when those things come up, because it's like, I would absolutely love us to find some.
Yeah.
But it is very common that the same conversations that surround Bigfoot now have circled and started to orbit the thylacine. And it is, of course, not impossible that there could be a population, because we know this animal did exist.
Sure.
But
unlikely. Like, given what evidence we have, they're probably not out there.
Yeah. And this is even more so than cryptids like Nessie and Bigfoot, which we don't know what their behavior would be or what their ranges would be. Like, no, we do know where these lived, and we do know what habitats they occupied. There's lots of stuff we don't know because we were not studying them while we were wiping them out as we would have today. But
which actually is kind of an interesting thing about thylacines that I was thinking about in prep for this episode, that we have so much information about thylacines. And this is one of those places where it is that weird overlap between living animals and extinct animals. There is so much that we absolutely know about thylacines. We have video footage. We have their complete genome. Like, we have specimens of them in museums. But then there's also all this stuff that we just don't know. Like, we don't know what they ate.
Yep.
Like, we don't actually know, like,
what consisted their diet.
Yeah, what kind of diet they had. We don't know a whole lot about their social or reproductive behavior, which is such a weird thing to have, because they made it far enough for us to collect them in museums and take pictures of them, but not far enough, not long enough into, the realm of scientific exploration for us to start documenting those behavioral things. So they exist in this weird limbo space where we know so much more about them than you'd expect for an extinct species, and so much less than you'd expect for a large apex predator that lived alongside modern humans. And not just modern humans in the archaeological sense of like Homo sapien, but like last century humans.
Just a handful of generations ago.
Yep.
Like
there are people alive today who coexisted with thylacines.
And so like that's something I think about, and I feel like they are a really great, I don't want to say great, but they are a poignant example of that, where we were not paying attention to them scientifically while they were around the way they deserved. And by the time we were asking those questions, they were gone. And it makes me think of, we mention this every now in the podcast, where there are certain groups that are just notably understudied today. Certain, whether it be a species of shark or group of animal, where it's like, yeah, we know things about them, but people just aren't asking the same questions that they ask about other groups with this group. And so there's a whole bunch of questions that it seems like we should know because we spend a lot of time with these animals, or they are well known as a presence on the earth today, but no one's done that research. And that my brain will then go, yeah, so if they disappeared tomorrow,
that's it.
All those questions we've not been asking,
that was our chance,
would be gone. We would just have to accept that we will probably never know those things. And that's, it is a very
depressing
and
it's very depressing.
The thylacine kind of acts as that harsh example, that life lesson of it, of like, no, this is what we're talking about. Here's a bunch of obvious information.
Right.
That we just never bothered to write down until the last one, after the last one died.
It's also an interesting thing with the thylacine, because you were talking about how unique it is, that it has that sense of not only is this a missed opportunity for this species, but this whole type of animal. One thing that I have never really put a lot of thought to, but which is obvious in thinking about it, is that there is also a fossil record of thylacines.
Yes, yeah.
That this was already the remnant of this formerly more diverse group of animals. This sort of ancient history of wolf-shaped marsupial predators that exists in the fossil record of Australia and nearby places, which is a very cool... It's kind of like when we talk about like Thylacoleo and Thylacosmilus, these marsupial predators that are convergent with things that we still have today. With the thylacine, we so often focus on the thylacine, right? Yes. Thylacinus cynocephalus, I think, is the species. That I often forget that there were more.
Yeah.
This was a whole group of animals. And I don't know very much about the fossil record of thylacines.
Me neither.
Or how good a record it actually is.
Yeah. Me neither. And which is another thing that's notable about the group, just studying them from an evolutionary perspective, is they're also a iconic example of convergent evolution.
Yes, the other thing they're famous for.
Yes, that they are. We keep calling them wolf-like because they are unusually wolf.
So wolf-like.
Oh, it is.
You copied
weird.
Off the page of the wolf sitting next to you in class.
Yes, and so it is fascinating getting to see that convergence, and that it was a long, a history of that this wasn't just the recent group got there, but there's been this other group of mammals that realized, if I want to run down prey and kill it, having a long snout and powerful legs, and
this is the shape for
this is a good shape to do that. That's very, very cool.
Yeah. How cool would it be if they were around for us to make those comparisons? Because then they could be an iconic example of something that is called convergent, but actually here's a whole bunch of the weird differences that we see when we watch their behavior.
Yes.
But alas,
yep.
We do not have that. Traci, thank you for supporting us on Patreon. Thank you for suggesting this topic. We're sorry that it became depressing and philosophical. But you requested thylacines. I think it's bound to happen.
This is thylacines, probably only second to some Galapagos tortoises, is the first group that comes to mind when I think of endlings.
Yes.
Where there is a single member left.
Yep.
So yeah, they are right there in that depressing circle of conversation.
It often comes up in the mini episodes. It comes up in the main episodes, but in the mini episodes especially, because they're not really structured like main episodes. The question of, here's this group of animals, how much of this discussion is going to be put to the thing about this group?
Exactly.
Like,
because it's a little bit of what first comes to our minds,
right?
When you mention this animal,
Parasaurolophus. Like, cool. How much are we going to talk about noises?
Yep.
That is the thing with this type of animal. With thylacines, it's like, yep, time to depressing discussion about extinction, about 45 seconds.
Yeah.
So that's what's very tempting to discuss. Well, if we do an episode about thylacines someday, we'll get to talk about their fossil record and what's known of their behavior and anatomy and all that stuff. But the kind of off-the-cuff discussion about thylacines is a conversation about extinction and conservation.
But to add just a slight uptick to the conversation, part of the reason why that is the way things lean when we think about thylacines is because we miss them. Like, they were cool animals.
Very cool.
Charismatic. I was glancing over the Wikipedia. They're on the coat of arms of Tasmania, I think.
Yeah.
Like, they are still, to this day, representative of pieces of land and groups of people. Like, we are mourning their loss, and that's why we are so focused on their loss, because we loved them.
And how cool that there is a nation whose coat of arms or whatever it is this recently extinct animal. It's like in fantasy settings where you have the house, like the Targaryens.
Yeah,
like, yes, dragons are our official animal. They're extinct. The last of the dragons were wiped out many years ago, but where they remain on our coat of arms.
Exactly. Yep.
That's super cool.
It's really impressive. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Way to go, thylacines.
We are sad because how much we love these animals.
Yeah. So, thanks again, Traci. This has been a lot of fun. We hope that you have enjoyed our discussion of thylacines. We hope that you'll stick around and continue to support us and listen to the podcast. We appreciate both of those. We appreciate the Patreon stuff, which is great, but also just you being a fan and listening to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And this was a fun one. As sad as it was, it's always nice to get to talk about thylacines.
Bye for now.
See ya. Hello, David.
Hello, Will.
And hello, Oscar. Welcome to your personal patron mini episode where you requested for us to talk about one of your favorite animals, and it happened to be Shrikes.
Which is a very good choice for a good animal to talk about.
Butcher birds.
Butcher birds.
Yeah, Shrikes are a very interesting group because they're in the group the passerines, which is your big group of perching birds and songbirds.
You think of a bird. Yeah. You think of a bird that isn't a flightless rat-type or a bird of prey, and it's one of these.
So they fall within that group, but then they are predatory and have very unusual behavior.
Yeah, when I was reviewing reading through the Wikipedia page, reviewing some information about this group, it was noted multiple times they are not birds of prey.
Yep.
They are technically not considered birds of prey, even though they are extremely accomplished hunting birds.
Yes. And so it's like when you find those examples in nature of like, here's, this mouse, but the grasshopper mouse is a specialized insectivore and is a predatory mouse. Like, it feels like that of like, here's this group that is eating seeds and fruits and
singing songs.
Yeah, and then this one has a hooked beak and is often eating insects like a lot of the others are.
Sure.
But then we'll also take down lizards and stuff.
Bats and things. I saw at least one report of a shrike eating a snake.
Yes.
Of course you did. Well, and the sort of evolutionary trajectory of a group of birds where you said, cool, this is a whole family of birds, a whole lineage of birds that is not highly adapted for hunting. Here is this one group, this family, Laniidae, the family of the Shrikes, which are going in the direction of becoming extremely accomplished hunters. However, unlike birds of prey, unlike your hawks and eagles and stuff, you don't have talons.
Yeah.
Which is really that's a big part of the bird of prey strategy.
Well, that's so, not only is it so important to that group, actually evolutionarily, but it's so iconic
Right.
to predatory birds that like we put talons on any scary thing that flies
Yes.
in media in games.
Well, and it's also what they're using for hunting. Like,
Mhm.
birds of prey are not grabbing stuff out of the air with their mouths most of the time. They are using those talons. We talked in the claws episode about how those will be slightly different between different groups of birds of prey because of the slight differences in their hunting. Like, those are so important for a hunting bird to have. And then you've got this group of shrikes like, hey, you don't have the feet.
You got perching feet.
You have perching feet. You don't have feet for this hunting lifestyle. And the shrikes went, don't worry, we'll come up with something.
So what else do the birds of prey have? Well, famously hooked beaks. Cool, we'll do that.
We can do that. Yes, but you see what the birds do. Well, the birds of prey will use those talons to hold their prey down so they can use their beak to take pieces off of it. And without specialized feet, how are you even what are you going to do?
And the shrikes are taking notes. Something sharp.
Something
to
sharp.
hold prey.
Which, of course, brings us to the thing that shrikes are absolutely famous for. Apparently, the name shrike comes from the noises they make.
Yes, yeah, the shrieking noise.
They make, like, they make repulsive shrieking noises. Like unpleasant shrieking noises.
Uncomfortable.
Yes. Shrikes are called butcher birds, which apparently the genus name is butcher.
Yes, yeah.
Lanius is the famous genus of shrikes.
And it comes from the term for
butcher.
Yes.
Because they impale stuff.
Because they hang up meat like a butcher hangs up sides of meat.
So shrikes are famous for grabbing prey and then finding, like, sharp thorns or something and sticking their prey onto the thorn so that they either can hold it in place while they take pieces off of it.
Yeah, now this anchors the prey since they don't have those powerful feet to hold it.
Or to keep it there for later.
Yeah.
That they'll just store it there. You wait here, I'll be back when I'm hungry.
It's a pantry now.
Yes.
And that's such a awesome use of your environment. And I see stuff like that and often wonder where we draw the line on tool use.
Right.
Because it's like, all right, you're not wielding the thorn.
No.
But if my wall hook where I hang up my towels is a tool, how is this not like that? Sure does seem like tool use, and that's such an intriguing way to use your environment.
Yeah. Well, I was also really interested in sort of reviewing information about shrikes to note that that is a behavior that kind of shapes a whole bunch of different aspects of shrike lifestyle.
Yep.
That they use it for storing their food and for eating their food. They also use it for courtship. Like, they will stock a larder with a bunch of stuff to impress potential mates.
Yeah, look what a good provider I'd be.
Yeah, well, it's like the really disturbing version of a bowerbird.
Yes.
It's like, yes, look, I have made this incredible display just for you. It is made of the dead and impaled bodies of a bunch of cool stuff that I found.
I sacrificed them for our love.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and it also makes me think of how it shapes their overall ecology. And like, if a butcher bird finds itself in a place without thorny plants, it either has to find alternatives or they may not be able to live there. Like,
yeah,
that is a aspect of your environment that now you need as a prerequisite for at least certain hunting styles. Like, maybe they would just adjust to smaller prey.
And I know that I've read that they will just catch bugs out of the air. Like, they can eat like bats and just grab bugs out of the air.
Which makes total sense, but it would mean that you would see a stop to lizards being on the menu because you can no longer decapitate them. Yeah. So, and we do see that in some places where they are using other stuff, famously barbed wire fences.
Yep. Which is one of those examples where it's not your fault that you're using barbed wire.
No.
Like, you didn't make the barbed wire. We did that and we put it out there. But, oh man, if you're going to live up to your reputation as a really intimidating, brutal behavior.
Which is one of the most metal birds.
Yes. It's, yeah, well, listen, there's no thorns around. This barbed wire fence will do.
You gotta know that there's been some instance of like an overzealous or dense population of shrikes that just like line a barbed wire fence, and someone drives by and is like, some sicko lives there. Like,
Right?
what kind of display is that?
Who's doing that? That's disgusting.
You're sick.
Yep. Listen, and they're like, listen, the females love it.
Yeah, and
This-
the person whose
gonna-
house that is like, it's the birds. It's the birds.
It's such a cool behavior, especially because I can think of other species that create caches of food.
Mm-hmm.
I like squirrels are a famous example. They'll bury seeds and nuts and stuff. And even other species that create caches of prey.
Yes.
Like we've talked about. Shrews do this
Mhm,
very famously and disturbingly, but they are venomous enough to paralyze prey, and they'll stick it in their little den and then wait and come back for later. I don't know of other animals that are doing something where you are hanging your prey on something
Yeah.
to then come back later. Something that is very uniquely a bird capability to go, I'm going to create my larder way up here.
Yeah.
And no one else will get it. But in order to get them to stay there and to stay in one place so that I can eat off of them, I need to stick them onto a sharp thing. It's a very distinctive... It's found in a number of shrike species,
Yes.
but it's a very distinctive behavior that I don't know of other animals that do that.
The closest thing I can think of, and it's not on the same scale of number of prey, potentially, but I think leopards will do that. Well, they will stash a prey item up in a tree.
Put it up on a branch.
And then come back for it later because most of the other big predators in Africa won't be able to get up there
Yes.
unless it's another leopard, which only makes this tiny bird that like
Yes.
the only
We're
other animal I
comparing you
can
to a
think of
leopard.
is a leopard.
And leopards, I think... This is an episode about shrikes, but just for a leopards, I think, get a reputation for being less notable and less
Mhm.
impressive because they live alongside lions
Yep.
and cheetahs, which are superlatives.
Yes.
Leopards are awesome. They're
I'd-
such cool animals.
I would like to see anyone else just grab a gazelle by the neck and then just go vertical with it.
with in your mouth.
Yep, just without breaking stride or speed, just up. But that is insanity.
And shrikes have a very sort of similar impressiveness to them. Of I grabbed this lizard
Mm-hmm.
and I flew it up to this thorn and I punctured it on this thorn so that I could save it here for later and then eat off of it.
Well, and they've always, when I see pictures of a shrike, feeding on or just next to its larder, I often have the disassociation of like, how did you do that?
Yes, you are a tiny little bird.
I see the dead body. I'm not questioning you, but I can't picture the scenario where you killed that, carried it back here, and then skewered it.
Mm-hmm.
That's A is not matching B.
You are more than what you appear.
Yes.
Little bird. They're not tiny, but
No.
they are like sparrow sized.
Exactly, yeah.
They are. I've seen they were described as medium sized passerines.
Yeah, they are by no means beefy birds.
Yeah.
So it is quite impressive what they're able to achieve, especially like we said, they're not catching their prey the way we would typically think. It's got to basically all be that beak, which is just a unique way for a predatory bird to hunt, minus like herons, which
Right.
then I'm like, well, yeah, of course you're using your beak.
Absolutely.
It's a sword.
Look at it.
You have a lance on your face. So they are very impressive, unique birds that at a glance do not look like either of those things.
Yes, exactly. I know there is at least some fossil record of shrikes, because I've seen it mentioned at least once, at least an example of fossil shrikes.
Always fossil around many tiny bodies.
Well, and I was going to say, I don't know if there has ever been a fossil, but I could imagine the possibility of a fossil. I imagine a fossil in amber
Yes.
of like a insect impaled on a thorn.
Yep.
I don't know that that's ever been found. It probably hasn't, because I'm sure I would have seen it on the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, that seems like that would be big discussion.
But you could. That absolutely could be preserved in the fossil record,
Well-
given the right circumstances.
It also makes me wonder, and this is where my knowledge completely bottoms out, like how closely are they tied to the plants they use? Is there any coevolution between like
Are there certain plants that, like, this plant has big enough thorns?
Mhm.
Well, I know that shrikes tend to live in open environments.
Yep.
They tend not to be forest-dwelling birds. And the classic image in my head is, like, shrublands.
Yep.
So it's possible that a forested environment wouldn't have the right kind of plants.
Yeah.
So there's probably at least some relationship in that sense.
Well, and I don't know how lengthy their fossil record is or how long we suspect they've been predatory.
Mm-hmm.
But if they've been using plant thorns for this, like, is there any benefit to the plant? Like, do the remains that fall down help fertilize the plant?
Getting phosphorus and stuff?
Yeah. So would there be any symbiotic pressures for, plants to evolve longer thorns, not for defense, but to attract shrikes, to be an ideal habitat and hopefully gain that boost in fertilizers? Like, I don't know. I don't know what we see. What happens to the plants that shrikes use?
Well, and also, is there that now it's a stretch. This is a stretch. Would there, if you had plants with bigger and bigger thorns, would that permit
Larger prey?
The feeding of larger and larger prey, and would that drive the body size of larger and larger shrikes?
Yeah. And so, yeah.
Just have a jackrabbit up on a giant thorn sticking off of a thing. Usually it's bugs. Like, usually it's insects or very small vertebrates.
Yes.
Which is still very impressive.
Oh, yeah. I did see one thing noting that at least some shrikes, or maybe one species, will use it as a way to handle toxic caterpillars.
Yes,
or
I did see that.
grasshopper.
Yeah.
And that they'll pin it up and then let it sit.
Wait for a couple days.
And then the toxins will degrade just as chemicals as molecules often naturally do.
Right.
When they aren't being maintained, so that then by the end of it, it's just a grasshopper.
Yeah. Which is so cool.
That's all. It's like crocs storing their stuff to let it rot a little bit to make it easy. Like, that's a very similar strategy of, I want to eat this, but it's not ready yet.
Yes.
It's not ripe.
It's not ripe.
We gotta let it age. Put it on the hook.
And this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, that I was impressed in reviewing information that this feature of theirs isn't just for one thing.
Yes.
They have developed this cool behavior, and they use it for a bunch of different purposes and a bunch of different stuff.
It's a very defining behavior for the way they live.
Yeah, it is very much like we see in a lot of animals. You've developed an unusual behavior, use it for as much as you can, or a very unusual feature, like an elephant trunk. It's like, that trunk is used for 100 different, like, there's tons of different uses for that. And it's very cool to think of the various ways shrikes have gone, this is what I'm known for, might as well make the most of it.
Yeah, it is. That is, every now and then we come across groups like of modern animals that I am more curious than others to see where you'll go evolutionarily. And shrikes definitely, like, will we see even more specialized predatory shrikes?
Yeah.
Millions of years from now, will they develop other adaptations to hunting? Like, what is this unique bird going to do?
Where does this go?
Yeah. Or is this a blip? Will they generalize, and become more normal perching birds?
Well, and it also is it's one of those modern behaviors that I look at and go, I can't think of any other animal that does this. Have there been extinct animal? Were there dinosaurs that did this?
Yep.
Like, were there little, like, Microraptor or Velociraptor style dinosaurs that did this sort of behavior? Probably not, actually, because they had the claws to help pin down their prey. But, like, what were there other animals? Could there have been other animals in the past? Or pterosaurs?
Yep.
Could there have been pterosaurs that did this kind of behavior? I don't know why not.
Yeah.
And how cool would that be if this is one of those things?
Have previous bird groups.
Yeah.
Has this come up multiple times among birds? And yeah, it is.
Yeah. Here's hoping for that amber specimen someday.
Yeah.
Of a little Cretaceous bug that's impaled on a thorn where pterosaurs have been flying around.
Absolutely. This feels like a very all yesterday's kind of behavior of, like...
Yeah. All right, paleo artists. Let's see it. Let's see butcher pterosaurs.
Yep. Oh, man.
Oscar, this was a great suggestion for a mini episode. We have had a wonderful time talking about butcher birds. We hope that you have also had a wonderful time listening to us talk about shrikes. Hopefully, perhaps, we will get the chance to talk about them more on the main podcast at some point in the future. In the meantime, thank you again for supporting us on Patreon. Thank you for being a devoted listener, and thank you for giving us this very cool group of birds to geek out over for a little bit.
Yeah, they are ever so interesting and slightly intimidating.
Yes. Well, this is one of those animals. We always try to toe this line between allowing ourselves to be impressed and to feel emotions about evoked by animals and wildlife behavior, while also not being overly dramatic or without being invoking fear
monstrifying
or
them.
judgment. Yes. And this is when we're like, this is super cool. It's super fascinating. You are impaling corpses on a stick, and that's hardcore. You were a hardcore bird.
We wrote a whole book and have made many movies about a human who is famous for doing that. like when you start entering Dracula territory,
yes,
we can't help but embellish a little bit on how you make us feel.
Very cool birds. Very cool. Oscar, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to get out of here. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
And hello, Lucy, and welcome to your Patron mini-episode. You already know this part, but you are a subscriber on our Patreon at a particularly high level, and you get the reward of a little mini-episode. Our thoughts about a topic of your choosing and what you have chosen is Entelodonts.
Yeah.
A very cool group of animals that we've talked very little about on the podcast.
Yeah, no.
Over time, an interesting ratio to how famous they are as extinct animals to how much we've actually gotten to talk about them.
Yeah.
And since we haven't done an episode about them, this is mostly because I guess not a lot of research is being done.
Yeah.
Well, because oftentimes there are things that don't show up in the news very often, not because they aren't researched, but because that research doesn't make the news headlines, and we like to pick things that we can link a popular article to. But any research that's getting done on Entelodonts is liable to make a headline because you get to put the word hell pig in the title. So yeah, I wonder how active there is research on Entelodonts.
Yeah, and I don't know how widespread and robust their fossil record is.
Mm-hmm. I get the impression that there are some good specimens and well-known species, but yeah, I don't know if they're known from very much remains.
Yeah, I when I glance at the wiki, they mentioned one, when they're mentioning some of the biggest species, they mentioned one where it's only known from fragmentary remains. So yeah, I'm not sure what the current scenario and
sort of
field
the status of Entelodon research. Yeah, but they are extremely famous because again, they kind of have the thing that forest rackets have going on. Where you can talk about forest rackets and describe forest rackets, and that's all really cool. But then we called them terror birds, and now the level of recognition has gone up immensely.
Well, their marketability.
Now, yes, exactly. Entelodonts are the hell pigs, or the Terminator pigs.
Ooh.
As I have seen used a number of times.
Will they be back?
Because
we have lots of questions.
Famously. They come back.
Usually, though, not as good as the earlier versions.
That's true.
Yeah, so don't get too excited. They may come back, but it's going to be a mess.
It's gonna be a little bit weird.
Their first two runs were much better.
Entelodonts, funnily enough, probably not pigs.
No. I learned that while glancing at it as well.
Yeah, that they are. It sounds like they were thought to be. So today we've got pigs, which are suids, and peccaries, which are teosuids, which are sort of the pig group.
Yes.
And they are very similar. Peccaries here in the New World, pigs there in the Old World. And Entelodonts, it seems, were once perhaps thought to be part of that group, but now are considered more closely related to the lineage that includes cetaceans and hippos and stuff.
Which makes very much sense looking at their face, because they've got a very scary hippo face going.
Well, the Entelodonts are famous for, A, being quite large. The largest Entelodonts were cow and horse sized.
Yes.
Pretty big artiodactyls.
Would be looking you in the eye line.
They are famous for having all these projections for muscle attachment on the face, for having big, sharp teeth.
often very long jaws.
Long muzzle.
Like not actually crocodilian in shape, but very like it is unusually long when you think of just mammal jaws.
Yeah.
Mammals don't typically go for that really long, toothy jaw. They have kind of a croc mouth on the front of them, which is impressive.
And they're also famous for being a lot like pigs.
Yes.
There's a reason that they were linked with pigs for a while.
Their dentition gets compared a bunch.
Yeah, their teeth, just the general shape of their skull and jaws is very pig-like, which is terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
A pig the size of a horse. We think of pigs as being cute, adorable little animals.
And yummy.
They're cute and yummy, and they're adorable in like cartoons and stuff.
Yeah.
But even farm pigs can be very intimidating creatures. And wild boars and even peccaries.
Yep.
These are Entelodonts are thought to have been similarly omnivorous, likely living similar lifestyles to modern pigs. But a boar the size of a horse, that's a very unsettling. I wouldn't want to stand next to that animal.
No. Well, it's like, wild boars and peccaries today are notorious, like, people are, they're very similar to, like, the Crocwise commercials that you'll see in Australia of local dissemination of knowledge being like, leave peccaries alone.
Yes.
They will send you to the hospital.
You will get gored. They've got big tusks.
They will, like, sever tendons and stuff, and you're like, they are going to maul you because their little sharp teeth are terrifying. So this is, even though they are probably not pigs, every other title that goes in front of that so far has been like, Terminator whatevers.
Well,
yep.
And when I was reading about them, I had the realization that you have a lot in common with pigs, but also you appear to be on the lineage that includes cetaceans and their close relatives.
Yep.
And you have a bunch in common with hippos. Like a lot of that skull, a lot of the skull feature are reminiscent of hippos. They are large size. So they're not so much hell pigs as they are hippo pigs, which is an even scarier name.
Well, yeah, and like, of all the Venn diagrams, the one that overlaps pigs and hippos, and in the middle you find Entelodonts, like, no.
You shouldn't have mixed those things.
Those circles should have been far apart.
Please keep those separate for the good of the world.
Yeah, they are, well, and they, like, there's tons of impressive fossils out there, but when you get to stand next to the skull of one of these animals, it is just one, like, was this drawn up for a comic book? Because it is just intimidating. It is just impressive and kind of scary.
Well, they also had just big heads. For their body size. They're just big-headed animals. Again, very much like hippos.
Yep.
Big ol' skulls filled with sharp teeth. I think Entelodonts are often, when I hear them described, they are often sort of popularly thought of as predators. That name, Hell Pig, Terminator Pig, sort of brings to mind this image. I probably have seen them compared to T-Rex.
Yeah.
Because they have big heads full of teeth and they're large animals. And it's an interesting scenario because on the one hand, these are artiodactyls. These are hoofed animals. They are not predator. These are not hunters. These are not. These were probably omnivorous. They probably ate similar things to modern day pigs and peccaries. But also, pigs and peccaries will eat anything.
Yep.
And if you're 5 or 6 feet tall at the shoulder, anything might very well include rather impressively sized small animals.
Yep. Like, it's not so much that you were a predator, but if some small animal got in your way, you probably would eat it, not because you hunted it down, but because it got too close.
It was there.
Yep.
Well, I've heard the description of giant pandas.
Yes.
That giant pandas are famously highly adapted for eating bamboo, but I've also heard it remarked that, if like a mouse or a small animal runs in front of a giant panda, they'll grab it. They'll grab it and eat it. And because you've got giant bear paws.
Yes.
And at least the front of your mouth is full of bare teeth.
And and bear-powered jaw. Like,
Yes.
you've still got a bite that's meant for crunching through bamboo shoots.
You're still a bear.
Yes.
That is, there is still bear in there. And the idea of, like, this is an animal that's not specialized for hunting or necessarily eating or scavenging in the way we think of with predatory animals or dedicated scavengers. But it has the
tool set
to do it. And also, they're just so big
Mm-hmm.
and so well suited in terms of your big sharp teeth and extremely powerful jaws that I wouldn't want to give it a chance.
No. Mm-mm.
This would be one of those animals, like, kept in captivity where you're like, yeah, it's not going to, like, come after you, but don't put your hand in front of its
Nope.
mouth.
No, don't get in reach of it. Well, I think part of the reason why it can often be so weird for many of us to categorize animals like this as to, like, where do they fit is because we've been given such a false impression of so many herbivorous animals.
Mm-hmm.
It's like deer, plant eaters, harmless. It's like, okay, but except when they're eating carrion or baby birds
Right.
or baby rabbits.
Right.
Like,
and also, except when they have big ol' antlers and they're bashing
Yeah.
them against each other and being violent.
so we have this false impression of so many herbivorous animals that they are just one thing. It's like even giraffes will eat bones to get calcium. Like, they're not killing animals typically, but they will absolutely, that's still scavenging. That is a dead animal, and that's part of the dead animal that they are consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it is so much more common than most documentaries will tend to show that plant-eating animals or herbivorous animals take in meat and protein and insects all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's the best source of protein. Like, plants are not as pound for pound nutritious as meat is because meat is concentrated plant. It's like you're gonna get more nutrition per pound that way. So if you come across a bit of it, most animals will take it. So an animal that has the teeth to really take advantage of it is probably just doing that even more so. Like, they probably were still, like, bears, more often, brown bears and black bears are typically plant eaters.
Yeah.
They're eating grass even, but like berries and stuff like that. But they are good enough that they can actually take down some prey when the time comes or when it presents itself.
And I think in that way, Entelodonts are probably very dissimilar from hippos, in that hippos, despite all of their various scary hippo things, are not meat eaters.
No.
That they are very dedicated. I'm sure that they will occasionally grab a thing.
I'm sure if a body is on the side of the river, they will absolutely go nom on it.
Sure.
Because why not?
But they're predominantly plant eaters. Comparing Entelodonts to pigs, and I like your comparison that you just made to bears.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, this likely was living a lot like big bears do.
And so that's another example where it gets so confusing because are bears apex predators? Yeah, in their environment, they take down the largest prey.
Right.
Nothing really can mess with them except another bear.
Mm-hmm.
And they are highly adapted. Large claws, powerful jaws, sharp canines.
Mm-hmm.
Very good for taking down meat. But that's not what they're doing most of the time. On average, if you were just able to, like, magically have an image of a bear, it's probably going to be eating plants.
Yeah. They are apex predators when they are being predatory.
Yes, exactly.
When a bear decides to hunt, it is an apex predator. But most of the time, it's I don't know if it's an apex herbivore.
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
really
right.
Isn't there really a thing?
Well, no, because if you overlap with mooses, that's the apex herbivore.
Yeah, sorry, pal, you're not the apex predator. So it is Entelodonts were probably, now whether or not they were hunting.
Yes.
Research has gone back and forth because, again, today, if we're comparing them to pigs, boars and wild pigs will absolutely scavenge.
Mm-hmm.
They eat a lot of carrion. That's pretty common for them to eat. They are dangerous enough and they are often territorial.
Yes, so they can attack.
So they certainly have the capability to kill something and then eat the carrion. But how much they actually are hunting things. And like if a little animal gets in their way, they might grab it up like so many artiodactyls will do. But boars aren't really like chasing after prey and taking it down and devouring it like we think of with predators.
Yes.
Entelodonts, if we're comparing them to pigs, more likely were doing that. They probably weren't chasing after prey and hunting it down.
And I think that's the big difference to make is, like, the terms can sometimes get a little confusing where you can be omnivorous and therefore at times a meat eater. But that does not inherently mean you're a predator.
Right.
Like, you're likely not stalking and pursuing or setting up ambushes. But like, if an Entelodont's eating on something or like scavenging a corpse and another scavenger gets in, like tries to sneak in a little too close and the Entelodont doesn't like that, turns and bites it and kills it in that bite. Well, it probably would then just swallow.
More carrion.
Exactly. Like, those situations, because you see that happen all the time with animals where it's like rhinos don't hunt things, but they kill other animals rather regularly, not because they chased it down, but the other animal got too close to the rhino. The rhino turned on it quicker than that animal could get out of the way and gored it. And if the rhino had the teeth to then eat it,
right.
That's kind of what I picture with animals like this.
Or like a hippo.
Like a hippo.
Yeah, if a hippo gets mad at something and bites it, that's a bad day.
Yep.
For whatever that animal is.
You very likely are not going to walk away, and if you are, probably not for too long.
I've seen that documentary footage of that lion.
Yep.
Look that up at your own
peril.
Well, it's
just rough.
Yeah, it's rough. That's rough.
I can't remember the name of that one. It's named after the river, if I remember right. And it's like a year at that river, and they don't censor a lot with that one. But like, I definitely picture animals like this because like deer, they don't hunt baby birds. But if they're going along and they go, ground-dwelling bird,
pa-pow,
I'm going to go snag one of those babies and get me some calcium.
Yeah.
They're not stalking the prairies for birds. It's just, if they come across it, they are going to take advantage of it.
Well, and I think that Entelodonts also are evocative of this really intriguing trend that we have Entelodonts, and we have all these hoofed animals that we're familiar with, artiodactyls, and Entelodonts have this reputation for their weird skulls and big teeth and all that. But they are a piece of this very broad trend of artiodactyls specifically being extremely surprisingly intimidating animals.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, pigs can be quite dangerous. They can be quite violent with each other. Hippos are famously like that. Camels are very, like, I'm trying to find the right word here so that we're not, like, I want to call them vicious, because they're just not vicious. But they can be very dangerous animals.
I feel like intimidating is a good word, because it's not saying that they are evil. It's not saying even that you should be scared of them. But like, or imposing maybe is a better word. Because like, moose is imposing, end of sentence. That's part of why it evolved that way. It evolved big, it evolved powerful, so that predators wouldn't mess with it.
Yeah, imposing and intimidating are nice because they are about our reaction, not about anything the animal's doing.
It's like, these are animals that you should be careful around because this is an animal that has some oomph behind it.
Moose is another good example. Bison is another. There's this interesting trend. We talked about giraffes in the giraffes episode. There's this interesting trend among artiodactyls, among our even-toed hooved animals, where they are predominantly herbivorous.
Yep.
And they tend to, they often live in herds, and they're often out grazing, and they're doing all the herbivore things. But they also have this repeating trend of being extremely imposing, dangerous animals. Well, and Entelodonts they have this reputation, but they're really just one point in this great spectrum of really intimidating artiodactyls.
And I wonder how much of that is just that so much of the world is so used to cows. And it's so easy to go, like, it's just another kind of cow, right? It's like, well, no, we domesticated these.
Right.
These are benign because we domesticated them. And these still kill more people than sharks.
Right.
Like, even the ones we've designed to live with us.
And I'm sure that there is, there may very well be a northern/western bias to this. It's like, here in North America, our common artiodactyls are like deer.
Yep.
And we've got cows. And in Europe, it's a similar scenario. It's very likely that if we asked people from Africa, they'd be like, no, artiodactyls are also.
Yes.
We've got camels and we've got wild
buffalo.
Pigs and we've got water buffalo and things like that.
Yep. The other thing that always pops in my mind when it comes to Entelodonts is their knobbly head, which has often been one of those examples pointed to in the fossil record as to how we represent fossil groups in paleo art, because much debate over why it is so ornate in its structure has been a common thing among researchers, and how do we cover that with soft tissue?
Where does all the muscle go?
Yeah. And it's often been, in many artistic interpretations, kind of what term you'll see go around, shrink-wrapped, where those bony projections are very clearly visible through the shape of the skin.
Right. The head fleshed out is still knobbly.
Yes. While others have pointed to the hippo very often to say, it also has a very knobbly skull, but is not knobbly because it is soft on the outside.
Right.
And I've seen many now more recent art of Entelodonts where they have just kind of a more fleshed out, quote unquote, normal looking head, less extreme looking head, and just that, probably there was soft tissue filling in a lot of that space.
Would Entelodonts have been sort of hippo-like in that sense, that it was an animal that was like shaped roughly like a water buffalo or a horse, somewhere in that horse water buffalo thing, and it looks perfectly benign if large, and then like a hippo, it opens its mouth and you go, oh, okay, we're just going to go the other direction then.
Yeah. Or, which is the other example people have used and why things kind of leaned the way they did the first time, is it more like a warthog?
Right.
Where your skin is shrink-wrapped to your very knobbly face.
Yeah, and you do have all these bony projections on your face.
You look as intimidating as you are on the outside. Like, we don't know. And this animal falls in that very interesting fossil category of you are similar enough to enough different animals that it really is difficult to know which one is a more reasonable comparison to how to represent you.
Yeah. This strikes me as one of those fossil groups that a ton of discussion has been dedicated to these, but there's tons more for us to learn about them.
Absolutely.
There's a lot more research to be done. I'm sure there is much demand among researchers for more Entelodont fossils, for a better understanding of this group, because this is a whole group of animals. It wasn't just Entelodon. These were around for many millions of years. There's a bunch of different genera. So I'm sure that this is one of those groups that it makes me think, probably because we've talked about it on a bunch of episodes in the not too distant past, it makes me think of like Dunkleosteus.
Yep.
This is a famous animal. It is famous for its really scary looking head. That there's actually a whole lot we don't know about this group and its evolutionary lineage. But any time we get the chance to research and talk about them, we're gonna, because it's super cool and interesting.
Because we're all curious.
Yes.
I also wonder how many people was Walking with Prehistoric Beasts, your introduction.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause that was where I learned about these animals, because that was the first time I saw one, and it very much portrayed them as like, and then the Entelodon shows up.
Yes.
Like, blomp, 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 blomp. And like just terrorizes everything else.
Yep. Which some artiodactyls are like that.
Hippos do that all the time.
When it may have been when the Entelodon comes along, everyone gets out of the way.
Just quietly leaves the watering hole.
This isn't it doesn't have to be a predator to just be a real mean animal who's going to mess with anybody that looks at it sideways.
Once again, like rhinos. Right?
Rhinos, yep.
You are not predatory, but everyone knows to stay out of your way.
It doesn't take much to set off a rhino.
So just give them a wide berth, let them do what they're going to do. The watering hole will be there afterward.
Also a group of animals with very large heads.
Yes.
And pointy bits.
Yep.
Lucy, thank you so much for suggesting Entelodonts. For sure, I imagine we will do discussions about Entelodonts in the main series of the podcast at some point in the future. Until then, this was a lovely little appetizer.
Until then.
Until then. This has been a lovely little appetizer for us to tide us over until then. And hopefully to tide you over with your Entelodont curiosity. We have a ton of fun doing these mini episodes that give us the chance to just kind of go off about a particular group of animals.
Speaking of just going off, when I was glancing their Wikipedia, it was talking about, I don't remember the name, it started with a D. Is
Daeodon.
Daeodon, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is one of the largest ones that's like 6 to like, I think it said 7.9 is the upper estimate for their like shoulder height.
I saw 6.
Yes, that's the one most common I saw, but like when they listed that species, it was like, that was the range. But either way, it had a picture with like the skeleton next to the person.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like the top of its back was at the top of the person's head.
Yep.
And I had an immediate moment of like, that's a D&D mount.
Oh, dire pig.
That's a
dire boar. That's basically
right?
a dire boar, yeah.
I would and it would be so great to like lean into like, this is a terrifying animal. But then if it's behaviorally still very much like a pig, like when we settle down, I just feed it stuff.
Yeah.
And it just like
give it whatever.
Is actually fairly friendly and intelligent.
I was going to say, do you think, because pigs are also notoriously clever.
They are.
I don't know if peccaries are clever.
I don't know, actually.
And it is worth noting that the pigs that I often hear about being clever are domesticated pigs.
And I don't
know if wild pigs are noted for being as clever.
I don't know if there's any historical evidence of peccaries being domesticated. Like
not that I know of.
Yeah, I don't know of any today, and I don't know if we have any evidence of like populations in South America having started to or attempted to or anything.
Yeah. Now, if I'm going to go wildly speculative and completely unscientific, Entelodonts are on the cetacean line.
Yeah, right? Right?
I'm trying to find excuses for...
Anytime you can turn an animal into a whale, David will take it.
And intelligent Entelodonts. Intelligence.
I also just had the image of comparing to them animals of all those zoo videos that you find of them like giving watermelons to hippos and then just tossing
Gallaghering the watermelons.
Here's a whole melon for you, buddy. And then he just crushes it.
Crunch.
I know what my next character's writing.
Oh, that'd be very cool. Lucy, thank you for your support. Thank you for your listenership. Thank you for being a dedicated fan to the podcast. And thank you for suggesting Entelodonts for this mini episode. We've had a great time recording it. We hope that you have had a nice time listening to it. And with that, we are off to do back to your regularly scheduled podcast programming.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, David.
Hello, Will.
And hello, Tobias. Welcome to your Patron mini episode for subscribing to us and supporting us. You requested marine iguanas, or iguanas in general, and we would love to discuss that.
Squamates.
Yeah!
Oh, I'm always happy to talk about squamates. And iguanas are a cool group of lizards. The thing that always gets me about iguanas, so I guess taxonomically, there is a genus iguana.
Yes.
Which includes the green iguana and then iguanas from the Antilles. There are a bunch of things called iguanas in the family Iguanidae.
Yes.
Which includes also like spiny-tailed iguanas and things like that. And then there is a major group of lizards called Iguania, which also includes anoles and chameleons and stuff. So the word iguana actually kind of gets thrown around quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's, and I don't know the etymological origins of the word iguana.
I think I used to know where it came from. I think maybe it means lizard.
I think
it's something like that, I think.
And that's what I kind of thought, because that very much feels like what the term is that it's...
Right. Lizard.
If I had to choose a name of a group of lizards in place, like if I was having to translate for aliens, they're like, you can't use lizard because that just doesn't work in their language. Use another name for lizards. I'd go, okay, iguanas.
Iguana, sure.
This type of animal's iguana now, because that's such an encapsulating term.
I think a thing that really I always stands out for me about iguanas is that so many lizards are lizard. Like you look at it and you go, that's a lizard. Even me, I am rather familiar with lizards. So there are thousands of species of lizards, and so many of them, if you pointed them out, I would go, yeah, that's a lizard. I don't know what kind of lizard that is. but it's got the shape and size of a lizard. Iguanas are very distinctive looking.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like green iguanas, the famous iguana species. That's a very distinctive body shape.
Yes.
They have that kind of saggy skin thing going on. They have that slight... I always picture an iguana with that slightly sloped posture.
Yep.
With holding its head up a little bit high with the sloped back.
Mm-hmm.
Iguanas are often very ornamented.
Yeah.
They've got all sorts of spines. Some iguanas change colors.
Yep.
I remember learning many years ago that green iguanas will actually, if I remember correctly, maybe this is wrong, but I remember learning that green iguanas will change color based on their social dynamic.
Oh, yes, I have heard
the highest ranking iguanas will, I think it was that they will have darker skin.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it changes as the dynamics shift.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
It's very, well, and they also are just, like, I feel like if you ask someone to draw an iguana, a lot of people could get a bunch of their key features.
Yeah, it's a very distinctive shape.
Yeah, they've got those, especially for the green iguanas, those large spines on the back, those long, very exaggerated dorsal spines. They've also got like the dewlap,
the jowls.
But then they've got those jowls and that distinctive bulb at the back of their jaw, that very circular scale that's there, and then like short faces, like. They are a unique group of lizards.
I think that it's useful to specify how interesting and unique iguanas are. They're also they tend to be arboreal, which is a cool thing for lizards too. Not an unusual thing.
No.
Although it always does stand out to me with the green iguanas, because green iguanas are also big.
Yeah, it kind of makes you like
big lizard,
the orangutan of lizards. Like, what are you doing up in trees?
Yeah, well, it's like the arboreal monitors, which we talked about in the monitors episode. It was like, yeah, some of those are real big monitors. You are a little too big to be up in that tree.
Absolutely, because you'll see some tree monitors, and it's like, yeah, you're like 1.5 feet long, perfect tree size.
Yeah,
and then you see another one, it's like that. No, because then you can fall on me, and I don't want
that would
you
hurt.
Falling.
Yes. So I think that it's nice to point out the ways that iguanas are kind of interesting and distinctive. If we are then going to talk about the one type of iguana that is utterly bizarre.
Yes.
Marine iguanas are their whole own thing. They are very iguana-like. They have that iguana. Yeah. They look a lot like a green iguana. They're not genus Iguana. They look like that iguana shape.
They've got the big claws, the shorter face, the big spines on their back.
Yep. And then they've just gone and done a weird thing.
Yeah. They have always stood out to me for, especially when I was a little kid, of like, I learned about marine iguanas and I immediately had the feeling of just, man, yeah, why? This is, everything about them is awesome. Like, they're like dark colored and like coal black, a lot of them. They've got these big spines. They've got this short face, but then it's like knobbly and horned on the top.
Yeah.
And then this long tail and these big clawed arms, and they swim around and like, this is the best lizard. Like,
this is a very cool lizard.
In my little kid brain, there were not many other lizards that could top the number of cool things this lizard had.
Well, and I think for me, I've known about marine iguanas because they're very famous.
Yes.
They show up in documentaries and stuff. I've known about marine iguanas so long that it took me a while to register how unusual they are.
Yep.
Because I was like, yeah, marine iguanas. Everyone knows about marine iguanas for sure. That's obviously. And eventually I reached an age where I went, oh, that's really weird.
What are you doing?
And then also having, getting into a stage in my life where I was being analytical about how we perceive different groups of animals and how we talk about them, and having the thought of like, I mean, we call them marine iguanas, but like, is that how exaggerated, how much are we exaggerating? And then learning more about them and going, oh no, you are a marine.
Yep.
You are a marine lizard, actually specialized for foraging and swimming around in the ocean.
Yeah.
They are, as far as our modern understanding goes, the only living species, I think there may be multiple species, the only living group of marine adapted lizards.
Yep.
They are the closest thing we have to mosasaurs.
Yep. Like, we've got lots of swimming lizards. There's plenty of water specialized lizards, but those are all freshwater.
Yes, very much like snakes.
Mhm.
There's tons of freshwater snakes, and then there's a handful of actual marine snakes.
Yes. And I said that, and then I immediately remembered a video I saw of Komodo dragons hunting a goat at the beach and like swimming around in the seawater at the beach. And like I know they've been known to island hop and like
Sure,
swim,
yeah.
but they aren't specialized for like they're good at swimming, and they're big enough that they can swim through some salt water and not get salt poisoning.
Like big crocodilians.
Yeah.
Or like crocodilians in general. Like, yeah, you may not be adapted for going across the ocean, but if you wind up out there for a little while,
yes,
you'll be okay.
like an alligator can swim at the beach even though they don't have salt glands.
Right.
But like these lizards,
marine iguanas, that this is you dive like 100 feet deep,
mm-hmm.
you hold your breath for like an hour, you are specialized for eating and digesting algae.
Yeah.
And thank goodness you live where all those super warm lava rocks are.
Yeah.
As you dive in the cold ocean water and then you have to come back up and recharge.
Yeah, well, and it also is neat because like that explains why you're such dark colored, because you need to heat up real quick because that water's very cold.
Yes.
And you need to not just go into a coma.
Also, a thing that I did not fully appreciate until I was refreshing my memory of knowledge about marine iguanas, they are called marine iguanas not only because, of course, they are marine iguanas in the Galapagos, but because the other closely related group of iguanas to them in the Galapagos are the land iguanas.
Yeah.
Which is such a weird thing to have to specify.
Yes.
To go, yes, these are the iguanas that live on land. You're like, well, yeah, they all do. Oh, not in the Galapagos.
Yeah. And I was glancing at the Wikipedia, and it seems like the current hypothesis or theory with them is that those two split from a common ancestor
Mm-hmm.
upon arriving on either the Galapagos Islands or some other nearby islands.
Yeah.
And which is almost weirder to me that it's like, so you got there and then split and have none of the land iguanas wanted to swim?
Right.
None of you?
One group went, listen, we've got a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it. And I said earlier, I think there are multiple species. I know there are multiple subspecies.
Yes, for sure.
Because they, across the, like so many things in the Galapagos, different subspecies are found on different islands.
Yeah.
Also, I looked at the Wikipedia page and learned that apparently there are certain cases where marine iguanas and land iguanas will still interbreed.
Yeah, there was a picture of a hybrid.
And create hybrid iguanas. Cool.
Yep.
An amphibious iguana is perfectly adapted for both.
This is how you get the Arthur Curry of iguanas.
Yes, that's right. This is the iguana that defends the oceans of the Galapagos.
Aqua iguana. Iguaquaman. Oh, there you go.
All right, comic book writers.
Yes.
Royalties go to the address in the episode description.
One of the other things that is significant to me about marine iguanas is you mentioned they eat algae, which is not super common among secondarily aquatic groups.
No.
Like, you've got manatees and their cousins, and I'm struggling to think of anything else.
Yeah,
like,
maybe there are turtles?
Yeah, like turtles. Yeah, there are green sea turtles.
Yeah.
But that's the only sea turtle. Like, the other sea turtles aren't algae eaters. The green sea turtle is a plant eater. The rest are predators. So, like, that's a very, very unusual thing for a secondarily aquatic thing. And it's neat because it's like, you didn't do this weirdly. You stayed an herbivore. Because most iguanas are herbivorous.
You moved into the ocean and went, oh, what's there to eat around here?
Where's the salad?
Where's the green stuff?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of neat because, like, a lot of times when we talk about weird members of a group, very often it's a shift in diet is part of that weirdness. And that, like, all right, they're weird because they eat more meat or they are the herbivorous member of this group or what. Like, you kind of just kept being an iguana, but now underwater.
Yeah. Well, and it's also that weird thing because eating algae is a strange thing to do because you're a relatively large vertebrate animal.
Yeah.
That's good. Are you on your way to being a whale?
Yeah, right?
You're like, listen, we're gonna specialize in the super tiny stuff and just stay that way.
Yep.
That's kind of a weird thing for a big, and again, these aren't huge, but like iguanas are good-sized lizards.
Oh yeah, no, like if we placed a marine iguana in your arms would get tired.
Yes.
Holding like that is.
I've
that
held
is
a green iguana.
Mhm.
Like, they're big.
That's
they
a
get like
hefty
6 feet
reptile.
long with that tail. The other thing that really stood out to me, I was, again, looking up, just reminding myself, looking up marine iguanas, and I don't know if this is a thing that I have observed about them before, or if it just hit me today, and I thought it was particularly relevant to this discussion. It just the shape of the body, the spines on the back, and especially the shape of the head. Because iguanas tend to have a short face.
muzzle.
And marine iguanas have a very short face. They've got that sort of knobbly thing. Marine iguanas look a lot like Godzilla.
Yep, they do.
They are very Godzilla-esque.
Yep, that was one of the things I was going to bring up.
Yeah, the face looks a lot like Godzilla. They swim in the ocean.
Yep.
They've got that lizardy body. They're very Godzilla-like.
They're dark in color. Like
Yep.
my little kid headcanon because I was a big fan of the '98 Godzilla, with Zilla that everyone hates.
Matthew Broderick.
Yes. But I loved it, and I still love it. Even I will absolutely own up to being
Despite its flaws.
Despite its flaws, I can't help the nostalgia I feel for it. But they don't ever establish like what specific lizard Godzilla mutated from, but they do show that the testing happened near a nest of lizard eggs. And they show, I think, a land iguana go by it. But in my head, I was like, well, you showed that iguana, but obviously it has to be a marine iguana, right?
It must be.
It must be. And so in my little kid, and I would say that to friends all the time of like, actually, the new Godzilla was mutated from marine iguana. And then I'd go off on a tirade about marine iguanas.
I actually brought this soapbox along with me.
I just presented that to my friends as fact. And none of them cared about the movie enough or had seen it as many times or knew as much about lizards to contradict me. So I just went around proclaiming that Godzilla was a marine iguana, and I still make that connection in my head to this day of like, I mean, it is the Godzilla lizard, so
and if it isn't the lizard that inspired depictions of Godzilla, then wow.
Yeah, right?
What a convergence.
That is a major coincidence. Yeah, they are so cool looking and just I find them very just pleasing to see. Mm-hmm. Just they're very unique. They're doing a cool thing. They look interesting. You see them sitting on rocks next to surf splashing up on the shore. Like,
yeah, which is such a weird thing to see a lizard doing.
And there'll be big groups of them. So it'll be this 20 lizards holding on to these volcanic rocks next to the surf. And that's such an awesome image.
Yeah.
And we mentioned their short face, like iguanas in general have short faces, but their face is like flat because they're pulling algae off of rocks. So it's not like it's not like wispy seagrass. It's like they're like
you're scraping it off with your teeth.
So you have to get your face right up against the rock, and you have this flat bulldog face.
This is a thing that we've mentioned this in previous discussions, where you brought up the idea of evolutionarily speaking, it's intriguing to look at some groups of animals and think, where does this go?
Yes.
Like, where does evolution take? Like, if you get the chance to survive well into the future, where do the selective pressures take this further? And I wonder are there adaptations for eating algae?
Yeah, absolutely.
Will you develop like flexible lips? Mm-hmm. Given enough time, like a manatee, and you can actually scrape the algae off of the rocks and things like that.
Will you start getting better at eating, further out where you can find like kelps and like seagrasses and stuff, like so that you are taking on larger amounts of marine plants and marine greenery?
Would you get bigger, both to facilitate holding your breath longer, just swimming more efficiently, going farther out to sea, and also because you can now access better quality food.
Yes, exactly.
Will you follow that age-old trajectory of marine things in just getting larger? I am completely on board for Mosasaurus to return. I will take herbivorous Mosasaurus.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. How interesting would it be if in the future we have marine lizards again?
The manatees of Mosasaurus.
But they're manatees. And
especially since over here, in another context entirely, we've got sea snakes fully ready to evolve into sea serpent.
Right?
That we'll have both.
Yes.
We
Yep.
can have both.
Well, and like, would you follow the same sort of body adaptations that we tend to see with like turning your fins, your limbs into flippers?
Mm-hmm.
Or because one of the things that they do that is very interesting for, once again, for a secondarily aquatic thing, is they cling to the rocks under the water.
Yeah.
With their very characteristic iguana claws.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of clinging to branches, they're anchoring to the rock underwater so that they can sit there and scrape the algae off the rock. So, like, would you maintain that?
Right. Or would you get better enough at swimming that you can push yourself down?
Yes.
Instead of having to hold yourself
or
down.
Would you start being able to control your buoyancy better? Would we start seeing you having gastroliths, that you swallow to be more neutrally buoyant in the water? It'd be very interesting if we could fast forward, and if they survive into the future, because they are also on the Galapagos.
Yeah.
Which
no species on the Galapagos is happy.
None are safe.
No, they're not.
So, like, but if they did, if we were able to fast forward and see, I'd be so fascinated to see if you do become fully marine lizards again. Would you look similar to mosasaurs, or
would you go your own direction?
Was that a good shape for a predatory marine lizard, but not marine lizards in general?
But a manatee shape, is your. Well, I imagine that they will keep their regular limbs for motion on land. And then they'll just get really, really big. And their spines will develop into these big plates. And the tail will just be super, super long. And then they will breathe radioactive beams of breath.
Well, they eventually learn to harness all the latent photosynthesis.
Yes, exactly.
All the sun energy that has been absorbed.
All that solar energy. And then they release a beam of light.
We are all made of star stuff, and I've learned to harness
it. and with it, I will unmake you. Tobias, thank you very much for this suggestion. What a cool group of lizards.
They're so fascinating.
Very cool group of animals. Thank you, as always, for supporting us on Patreon. Thank you for being a devoted listener to the podcast. And thank you for giving us the excuse to geek out about marine iguanas for a little bit.
Yeah, it was a fun one. These were so good.
There's so much to talk about there. These mini episodes are so much fun.
They're great.
Sometimes there'll even be a thing where it's like, oh, what? I don't know what direction this is going to go. I don't know what we're going to... I don't have there's no structure here. We just get to go. And they're so much fun.
Yeah.
When we get to talk about super cool creatures.
Well, it feels like a very pure, condensed version of what we've said before about our mentality with the topics for the... Every topic could be made into its own documentary series if you ask someone who's interested enough.
Yes.
This feels like a very condensed, pure version of that, of just, here's all the things that are interesting about this really quick. There's so much.
And the thing that always stands out for me about these mini episodes is that oftentimes we only kind of know what we're talking about.
Yep.
Like, we didn't do a ton of background read. This is sort of like our existing knowledge.
Firing from the hip.
Our general perspective on evolution and natural history, and some quick information we looked up online coming together to make this discussion. Imagine if we actually were experts.
Oh, yeah, like...
When the main episode comes along about marine iguanas or something, and we've actually done the deep dive. Oh boy, so much to do.
I know, like, they have the salt sneezes they'll do to get rid of the extra salt from...
That's the precursor to the radiation.
Yep. And, like, that's the one thing I know about their salt adaptation. I'm sure there's, like, weird stuff going on with their livers or something. Like,
probably.
There's probably a whole bunch of weird things that if we actually read a paper, it's like, oh boy, literally only scratching the surface. Let's talk about their kidneys.
Yes. Perhaps someday we will get to read a bunch of papers about marine iguanas. All right, let's cut ourselves off there. Thanks again, Tobias. We hope you continue to enjoy the podcast.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Common Descent podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.